In the headlines, rival parties in Korea reached compromise on 3 key bills prompted by the April ferry disaster. The parties partially accepted the victim families' demand for a greater voice in selecting the investigators in the probe. The top diplomats from South Korea and Germany urged North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons, saying it won't be able to pursue its nukes along with economic development. And Ukraine, Russia, and the European Union signed a deal to resume Russian natural gas supplies to Ukraine, easing concerns of winter supply disruptions for EU states.
Welcome to the program live from Seoul. You're watching Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin tonight with domestic politics here in Korea and news of a political compromise on 3 key bills prompted by the April ferry disaster.
Rival parties have agreed to give the victims' families more say in selecting who will participate in the investigation into the disaster. Our Choi You-sun reports on the latest developments.
Ending more than 6 months of political wrangling, the country's main rival parties have agreed on a package of bills related to April's ferry disaster. The two sides' floor leadership, which at times were reported to have quarreled loudly during last-ditch negotiations Friday, agreed to put the 3 bills to a parliamentary vote on November 7th. As for the much-disputed probe into the ferry accident, the parties have partially accepted the victims' families' demand for a greater voice in selecting the investigators, allowing family representatives to suggest the head of the special probe committee. And as the rival parties had previously agreed, the families will have power to veto candidates for a special prosecution carrying authority to indict. Talks on compensation will immediately begin, and the committee will have up to 1 year and 9 months before publishing a white paper on its findings. As for government restructuring to bolster the nation's safety management, a new safety ministry will be set up under the Prime Minister's office. But the opposition side accepted the ruling party's proposal to dissolve and reorganize both the Coast Guard and the National Emergency Management Agency under the new ministry, albeit each having autonomy over personnel appointments and the budget. The third bill, named after the ferry operator owner, would allow authorities to confiscate illegally obtained and inherited wealth. After 2 failed bipartisan deals and internal discord within the opposition party, the parliament may be finally on track to get to the bottom of holding those behind the ferry disaster accountable and addressing other bills that concern reviving the economy and improving the people's livelihoods. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
And in this next report, we talk about South Korea's groundwork for unification of the 2 Koreas. The first meeting of a joint unification advisory panel between South Korea and Germany was held in Seoul today. The German foreign minister says building trust between the 2 Koreas is the key to a smooth unification process. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
At a joint press conference with his South Korean counterpart Yoon Byung-se on Friday, German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said conditions for the reunification of the 2 Koreas were easing.
North Korea is becoming more and more isolated, and its longtime allies are not as opposed to reunification of the Korean peninsula as they once were.
Steinmeier is on a 2-day visit to Seoul for a meeting of their Joint Unification Advisory Panel. As the world's only divided nation, Korea is seeking to learn lessons from Germany's unification. The German minister said trust and patience were essential.
Through a process of trust building, South Korea must observe whether North Korea responds positively. If not, the South must not make any hasty investments and rather control its tempo.
Steinmeier said, however, this trust-building process will never be possible as long as the North clings to its nuclear program. And while a round of inter-Korean meetings slated for Thursday was scrapped due to controversy over anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns by South Korean activists, the importance of dialogue was emphasized.
Just like East and West Germany engaged in dialogue and cooperation, the two Koreas should do the same. It's also important for Korea to secure the support and understanding of its neighboring countries, as Germany had done.
The visiting German foreign minister said that Germany had achieved what all had believed was impossible, and added that a similar happy ending will also be possible on the Korean peninsula. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And in Seoul with the German foreign minister, a German lawmaker who recently returned from a trip to Pyongyang agrees that the North is ready to open dialogue on the human rights issue and inter-Korean ties. Hartmut Kuschik says Thursday that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is still firmly in power despite speculation about his health conditions stemming from his recent break from the public eye. He went on to say that North Korea wants to boost ties with Germany and the European Union. Mr. Kuschik added that he told the North Korean leader that Germany is willing to be an honest advisor by sharing its experience as a divided country, but that it cannot act as a mediator between the two Koreas. The now former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Sung Kim, has been assigned to a new position within the Obama administration. Diplomatic sources say he will serve a double role as the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs and Washington's Special Representative for North Korea policy. Finishing his three-year term last week, the first Korean-American ambassador to South Korea expressed a desire to continue working on issues related to the Korean peninsula.
Tokyo surprised global financial markets this Friday afternoon by announcing fresh monetary stimulus measures. The Bank of Japan said it would step up its asset purchases at an annual pace of 80 trillion yen, or roughly $720 billion from the current pace of 60 to 70 trillion yen. The unexpected move came in response to a lack of economic growth following a sales tax hike in April. The benchmark Nikkei stock index spiked to a 7-year high following the announcement and finished up nearly 5%. Experts here in Korea are concerned that Tokyo's latest move would weigh on local exporters by eroding their price competitiveness. China is Korea's largest export market, but for how long? With slowing exports to the world's second largest economy, Korea's finance minister says reversing the course will be no easy fix. Kim Ji-yeon reports on how this trend could last for a while and threaten overall economic growth.
There's no short fix to boosting dwindling Korean exports to China. The problems are structural, and this is why Uri Finance Research Institute says boosting exports to China is going to be a long, painstaking process.
China is increasingly producing the parts and equipment that once were imported from Korea, so Korean exporters need to increase their production of consumer goods and high-tech parts and materials.
Korea's exports to China are mostly comprised of intermediate and capital goods, which dropped by around 2% and 7% respectively during the January to September period year-on-year. Korea's exports of flat panel displays dropped by more than 9% over the same period to $12.5 billion. The researcher warns this downward trend could affect Korea's economic growth, since China is Korea's largest trade partner at more than a quarter of Korea's total exports. When taking Hong Kong into account, the proportion shoots up to nearly 30%. But it's a different story for other regions. Exports to China from the United States, the European Union, and ASEAN member countries are slowly inching up. In the case of Europe, consumer goods, particularly luxury items, make up a high portion of its exports to China. In contrast, the proportion of Korea's consumer goods, which include automobiles and wireless communication devices, comprise just over 3% of all exports to China. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And speaking of China, a growing number of Chinese companies and individuals are making investments overseas. Citing the country's Commerce Ministry, the state-run People's Daily reported that China's outbound direct investment stood at $17.8 billion last year. That's nearly 40 times higher than the figure recorded 11 years ago. And this year's outbound direct investment is also on a rise. It went up over 20% in the first 9 months compared from the previous year to around $75 billion.
Historians consider Japan's forced mobilization of women into sexual enslavement during World War II as historical fact, while the Shinzo Abe administration in Japan continues to hedge over the issue. But their case has just been further weakened by a new report written by Japanese authors who say there is simply no disputing that Japan was responsible for the atrocities. Connie Lee has more.
It's confirmation from Japanese scholars. Despite what Abe cabinet officials have said about the women who were forced into sexual slavery before and during World War II, Japanese historians say it is an unshakable truth that the Japanese military was deeply involved in the forced mobilization of the so-called comfort women. The country's representative research group, the Historical Science Society of Japan, recently released a report that criticizes the inaccurate historical accounts of the sex slaves, saying it is a fact that the women were forced into sexual servitude. Arirang TV spoke with the scholars in Japan, who said their report is timely.
We as historians make the statement because reflection on the issue and over relations between Korea and Japan is needed. We cannot deny the fact that sexual slavery did exist and the suffering of the victims was real.
The report goes against the Abe administration's stance on the issue. The Japanese leader has said that the women, many of whom were from Korea, were not forcefully mobilized, which he defined as breaking into a house and dragging a woman out. However, the scholars define it much differently, saying that forced mobilization includes all actions that go against a person's will, such as scamming, threatening, and trafficking. Prime Minister Abe says his cabinet would uphold an official statement issued in 1993, which acknowledged that Japan forced women into sexual servitude. But cabinet officials have openly and publicly denied that in recent months. Abe himself said there was no evidence to prove the claims. It's a move that suggests he wants to minimize his country's responsibility for the more than 50,000 estimated women who were forced into sexual slavery for the Japanese military. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Riding on the crest of the Korean wave, a mainly popular Korean TV series, an increasing number of Chinese couples are coming to Korea to get a unique Korean touch to their pre-wedding photos. Connie Kim tells us more.
Making a reservation at this wedding planning company is not a Korean couple, but Chinese to-be-weds who came to Korea for a photo shoot package. This Chinese couple will select their wedding dress and tux, get their hair and makeup done, and get their wedding photos taken. And they'll do it all in just 3 days.
After seeing actress Chun Ji-hyun in the drama My Love from the Star, I got interested in Korean-style makeup. As I was preparing for my wedding, I thought it would be meaningful for us as a couple to come to Korea and get our wedding photos taken here.
Bride-to-be Yao says she is thrilled to experience some of the high-quality services Korea's wedding industry has to offer, even if it comes with a price tag that is 3 to 4 times higher than in China. Despite the high cost of photo shooting packages for Chinese couples here, the nation's wedding industry is seeking to attract more would-be newlyweds from China, seeking a Korean touch to their once-in-a-lifetime experience. The craze for a high-quality taste of Korea's wedding industry has led to an explosive growth in recent years. One of Korea's largest wedding planning companies says it has shot wedding photos for nearly 790 Chinese couples this year alone, a major jump from the 5 it had in 2007. And as more companies cater to what Chinese couples are looking for, Korea's wedding industry is set to leap forward.
With the popularity of Korean dramas, Chinese couples want their wedding photos to be exactly like Korean celebrities' photo shoots. They look for backgrounds with tall skyscrapers or sets that show they are in Korea.
Many wedding studios now have translators on hand to help lure even more Chinese couples looking for specialized Korean wedding services. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Hanok, Korea's traditional houses were once thought to be consigned to the past, but a growing number of Koreans are now choosing Hanok over the more modern high-rise apartment. That's because Hanoks are now being fitted with sleek, up-to-date interiors despite their traditional exterior beauty. Our Park Ji-won takes us on a tour.
Hangyang-han is a gallery cafe that opened last year in central Seoul. The cafe features a traditional Korean exterior and modern interior designs. For its unique traditional beauty, it received the Best Hanok Award earlier this month from the nation's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. Kim Hyung-woo, the French-trained architect and owner of the gallery, says he blended modern construction materials while maintaining the unique beauty of Korean Hanok.
I tried to give traditional Korean architecture a more modern feel that fits the modern lifestyle. I blended modern materials to create modern spatial beauty in the traditional house. I think traditional Korean architecture can be reinterpreted in an infinite number of ways.
The number of Hanok houses in the nation has risen to about 100,000, nearly double the number from just 6 years ago. Due to their rise in popularity, SH Corporation, the public urban development company for the Seoul metropolitan area, has created a new Hanok village in northern Seoul that caters to individual buyers. A few months after going on the market, about 85% of the 156 lots available had been already sold.
Unlike modern apartments, Hanok is built in an eco-friendly way due to its construction materials, such as rocks, red clay, and trees. So people concerned about their health and allergies tend to show more interest in Hanok these days.
Combining the eco-friendly and aesthetic strength of traditional Korean housing elements with the comforts of modern living, Hanok houses these days strike a balance for the best of both worlds. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
After months of intense negotiations, Russia has finally signed a new deal with Ukraine to resume gas supplies to the crisis-stricken country.
With more, we turn to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, this agreement was brokered by the EU and not a moment too soon with Winterfest approaching.
That's right. The deal between Moscow and Kiev was struck on Thursday in Brussels and will also ensure that those much-needed fuel lines keep pumping into EU nations. But critics are questioning Russia's motivations behind this diplomatic breakthrough. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
Russia has agreed to resume natural gas supplies to Ukraine and the European Union throughout the cold winter months. The deal reached on Thursday in Brussels comes after several grueling rounds of talks.
With the strong support of the European Commission, Ukraine and Russia have today found agreement on their outstanding energy debt issues and on an interim solution that enables supplies to continue this winter.
Under the deal, Ukraine will pay $3.1 billion in 2 installments by the end of this year to cover its outstanding debt for its previous supplies. Kiev is also required to pay $1.5 billion up front to cover the bill from now until March next year. The European Union will help Ukraine make the payments through aid and guarantees.
The process has not been easy. However, we have managed to come to a compromise, and on many matters, the Russian has compromised as regards the price, as regards the structuring of the debt. This is our contribution to the compromise in order to stabilize the situation in Ukraine so that the autumn and winter period is safe and that the supply to the European consumers is also stable.
Meanwhile, the European Energy Commissioner said the agreement could be the first glimmer of a relaxation in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Gas supplies were suspended in June following disputes over Russia's annexation of Crimea earlier in the year. Ukraine, which relies on Russia for about half of its gas supplies, is being forced to rely on gas transfers from nearby European nations and its own reserves. A third of the European Union's gas is also from Russia, of which roughly 50% is transported in pipelines crisscrossing Ukraine. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And turning to West Africa, the head of the military in Burkina Faso has dissolved parliament and declared an interim government to lead the country after days of violent protests. The army seized power on Thursday after tens of thousands of demonstrators rallied in the streets of the capital city. Public outrage erupted when President Blaise Compaoré defied demands to step down after ruling the country for 27 years. Compaoré says he will hand over power after a 12-month transition period, but opposition leaders and protesters are demanding his resignation effective immediately. And staying within West Africa, a vessel carrying military and medical aid from Britain has docked in Sierra Leone to help stem the spread of the deadly Ebola virus. The UK ship Argus brought on Thursday a crew of 350 medics and Marines, as well as vehicles and helicopters. Meanwhile, Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, said more needed to be done.
This is a crisis that is so vast, with needs so great, with potential consequences so dire, that no country can afford to stand on the sidelines. A few are doing a lot, but a lot are doing very little or nothing at all. It is well past time to join what is a historic, groundbreaking, life-saving mission.
Speaking in Brussels, Power said every possible resource was needed, from doctors to nurses and even basic medical supplies. And finally, Halloween is upon us, and a growing trend has reportedly led costume shops to shift their business to cater to older trick-or-treaters. An estimated 75 million grown-ups in the U.S. will join children in festivities on this Friday, many dressed in elaborate and expensive outfits. According to the National Retail Federation, Americans will spend a total of $7.4 billion on Halloween this year. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here next week.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with Friday's Sports Rundown, starting with the KBO playoff Game 4 on Halloween night. Up 2-1, the Nexen Heroes sought to put the series in the coffin. The LG Twins needed a monster game to even it up. But tricks or treats aside, Nexen called up Henry Sosa to the mound. LG had ace Ryu Jae-guk. Now we go to the first inning. Nexen gets 2 runs, started by Kang Jung-ho's bases-loaded single. Now on to the third inning, Chung Sung-hoon's double puts LG on the board. And in the fourth, Lee Byung-gyu ties it up with a sacrifice fly ball. But next inning, Kim Min-sung crushes the 3-run shot, putting Nexen back up 5-2. Then top of the 7th inning, Kang Jung-ho slams the first pitch he sees over the wall for 2 of 4 runs there. Kim Min-sung ends up with 7 RBIs on the night as Nexen wins 12-2, taking the series 3-1. They face the defending champions, the Samsung Lions, in the Korean series starting next Tuesday. And more games on the night, this time over to the KBL. In the first of a doubleheader, the Mobis Phoebus hosted the KT Sonic Boom. And the home team took control with the offense dominating the paint, as well as the defense swatting away 7 shots. Moon Tae-young and Ricardo Ratliff hit double figures as Mobis handed KT their 5th straight loss of the season. Meanwhile, top foreign player Leo Lyons continued to shine with 28 points in the Thunder's home win over the Sakers. And over to the NBA, the Cleveland Cavaliers were defeated by the New York Knicks in their home opener 95-90, spoiling LeBron James's homecoming. Surprisingly, it fits a peculiar trend. As a rookie in 2003, the Cavs lost the season opener to Sacramento by 14 points. And in the first game with the Miami Heat in 2010, they lost to Boston. But with the Cavs, he became a superstar. And in Miami, he transformed into a 2-time champion. Now, having come back as a leader, despite the loss, the forecast looks pretty good in Cleveland. Now to golf for the LPGA Taiwan Championship. Korea's Park In-bi took the lead after shooting one of her finest rounds this season. For round 2 on Friday, Pak shot an eagle on the 8th hole to go with 9 birdies and a bogey, ending at 10 under par on the day and a stroke from her season's best. Now, the world number 1 took the sole lead at first at 18 under par overall going into the weekend, 3 shots ahead of China's Shan Feng and 8 ahead of the rest. And that wraps it up for me. Your weather's up next. Have a great weekend and good night.
Happy Halloween, everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. It was a wet and cloudy day here in Korea due to a low pressure trough approaching from the West Sea, and it is still raining in parts of Gyeonggi-do province. More autumn showers are in store now. 10 to 40 millimeters is forecast for Gangwon-do province and about 5 to 20 for Seoul, as well as both Jeollado provinces. Showers may be accompanied by stormy conditions and strong winds on the southern coastal areas. Other than that, it looks like conditions will briefly clear up tomorrow afternoon, but resume once again on Sunday morning. So with the rain falling all weekend, morning lows will dip to 4 degrees on Monday, leading to chillier conditions. On to Saturday's readings. Seoul and Busan reach 21, Daegu hits 19, Gwangju 20. On to other regions. Jeju peaks at 20, Dokdo hits 19, Mount Kumgang reaches 11. That's all the updates I have for you now. Have a wonderful rest of the Friday evening. I'll be back with more after midnight.
And that's primetime news for this week. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.